In 1914, the Germans attempted to execute a deployment plan against France. Formally named the Schlieffen Plan, this tactical maneuver saw short success before coming to a final stop. German generals failing to follow the plan properly, as well as being unprepared for the newly developed levels of firepower, led to a stalemate on the Western Front, which led to a new type of warfare being created. This is trench warfare, in plain English. Trench warfare was a type of land warfare in which groups of soldiers would occupy man-made trenches. These trenches would provide protection against artillery shells that previously had no answer. New developments in trench construction also included loopholes and periscopes to see out of the trenches without exposing one's head. This was very important, as the soldiers during this time would prefer to keep their brain intact when scouting out the battlefield. There were three basic methods to constructing a trench. The first, entrenching, involved digging straight down, as diggers were exposed during this time, entrenching took place during nighttime. The second method, sapping, involved digging away at the end of a dirt face. While this kept the diggers hidden, only one or two men could be working at the same time. The final method was tunneling. Tunneling involved the same steps as sapping, but a roof of soil would be left as the trench line was established. When the trench was ready to be occupied, the roof would be removed. Very few knew about the multitude of ways to dig dirt out of the ground. These trenches began and prevailed on the Western Front. Soldiers quickly realized that any previously established tactics were null due to the recent advances in firepower. They were forced to dig trenches in which they would be protected from bullets and artillery. In these trenches, soldiers would peek out and try and pick off any enemies at sight. With roughly 100 to 300 yards of given space between trenches, these soldiers would die almost instantly within what soldiers called no man's land, the area between the trenches. Even then, any territorial gains were measured by meters. The soldiers probably would have preferred hand-to-hand combat after a few weeks of this life. Most soldiers saw warfare on the front-line trench. This trench, guarded by barbed fences, was directly in front of no man's land and opposite of the opposing trench. Behind the front line was the support trench. Connected to the front line by the communication trench, soldiers in the support trench would deliver materials to the soldiers at the front line. The last trench, located all the way in the back, was the reserve trench, where soldiers would rest and get ready to come back up. This is also where all the scaredy cats would hide out until they were found and forced back onto their posts. Life in these trenches was pretty awful, dirty, smelly, and riddled with disease. Soldiers constantly lived in fear of rats stealing their food and contracting diseases like cholera. They also had to be on the lookout for enemy advancements, as well as prepare to advance themselves. A daily life of a soldier on the front line was harsh. They would wake up at 5 a.m., at times not even sleeping, and begin their lookout for enemy attacks. At 5:30, they would have their rum rations, and the day would continue normally until 6 p.m. During this time, they would clean the trenches and their materials, as well as rest. After 6, they began their lookout once more, and from 6:30 onwards, they set up patrols and dug trenches. Some soldiers would work on setting up barbed wire, or move back to the support trenches and be replaced. Really interesting work. They had to deal with new sorts of weaponry as well. Machine guns, tanks, and poisonous gases were introduced, and made warfare a real kicker. Just when one thought that he would be safe in a trench, he was met with an untimely gas canister that would often spell death for everyone in the trench, as gas masks were clunky and hard to get on. Tanks would simply roll over their trenches, in a very rude manner, and machine guns were just better rifles. To say the least, trench warfare was a very grueling and tiresome job, but it had to be done. This war was the last war in which the majority of fighting was done in trench warfare, due to the incredible mobility of tanks and the other technological advancements in the near future. World War II. World War I was labeled the Great War by historians, but it definitely wasn't the most exciting war.